Hello, my name is Chloe, and I am 28 years old. For the last 8 years, I've worked hard, saved every penny, and stayed focused on my future. I dreamed of buying my first apartment in the city, a place to call my own, far from the constant tension at home. My parents, though, have always treated me differently from my older sister, Laura. She's 31 and their favorite. No matter what mistakes she makes, they always forgive her. I, on the other hand, have had to fight for their approval my entire life. But I never expected things to reach this level of betrayal. One Friday evening, after a long day at work, I sat on my bed and opened my laptop to check my bank account. My goal was to transfer some of my savings to a new account for a down payment on an apartment I had been eyeing for weeks. I couldn't help but smile as I imagined the freedom that came with living on my own. No more arguments, no more walking on eggshells. But that smile quickly faded. I stared at the screen, my eyes moving back and forth as if the numbers would change if I looked harder. My heart began to race. The balance was far lower than it should have been. Instead of the $50,000 I had saved over the years, there was only $3,500 left. My hands shook as I refreshed the page, but the numbers didn't budge. I checked the transaction history, and that's when I saw it. Multiple large withdrawals over the past month. The names on the transactions were a nightmare, transferred to Laura's account. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Why would they do this? I had worked long nights, skipped vacations, and saved everything while my sister was out living like a queen. She had always been reckless with money, and now my parents had given her my savings without even telling me. I stormed downstairs, my breath heavy, my fists clenched. My parents were sitting in the living room, casually watching TV, as if nothing had happened. Laura wasn't home, and for that I was grateful. I wanted answers from them, not her. "Mom, Dad, what is this?" I said, holding my phone up, showing them the bank transactions. My mom glanced at the screen for a second and then looked back at the TV, as if what I had just shown her was nothing important. "Oh, that," she said with a shrug. "We used the money to help Laura with her financial troubles. You know how much she needed it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "My money? You gave away my savings without asking me?" My dad sighed, as if I was overreacting. "Don't make a big deal out of this, Chloe. We're family. Laura needed help, and you're doing fine. You'll save it back eventually." I felt my throat tighten as anger and betrayal surged through me. This is my money. I worked for years to save this, and you just handed it over to her? What about my future? My apartment plans? "We did what was best for the family," my mom said coldly. "And if you're going to be this selfish, maybe it's time you reconsider living under this roof." I blinked, stunned. "You're threatening to kick me out? After everything I've done for this family?" "Don't test us, Chloe," my dad warned, his voice sharp. But they had no idea that I had a surprise waiting for them, a surprise that would leave them completely speechless. I didn't say another word to my parents after that. My hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was anger. I quietly went back upstairs, locked the door behind me, and sat on my bed. They thought they could get away with this. They thought I would just let them rob me and move on like it was nothing. But they were wrong. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my email. There was a folder labeled Evidence that I had been building for years, just in case something like this ever happened. It had screenshots of messages where my mom and dad clearly favored Laura, photos of receipts where I had paid for family expenses without being reimbursed, and even a recording of an argument we had months ago, where my mom admitted that Laura's failures were our problem to clean up. I knew that alone wouldn't be enough, but I had a plan to make it work. First, I sent all the evidence to my lawyer. Yes, I had a lawyer, something my parents didn't know about. I had hired her months ago, when my instincts told me that my family couldn't be trusted with my savings. Her name was Sandra, and she had been helping me gather proof that the money in my account was mine and mine alone, protected under legal agreements I had signed when I opened the account. Within minutes, Sandra replied. "Sandra, got the files. You have a strong case. Call me in the morning, and we'll move forward with legal action. In the meantime, don't confront them again just yet." I exhaled, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. I wasn't alone in this fight. With Sandra's help, I would make sure my parents and Laura paid for what they did. But I wasn't done. I needed to add one more twist to my plan, something they would never see coming. I opened another folder on my laptop, this one labeled House Deed. The house we were living in didn't belong to my parents anymore. My grandfather had transferred it to me shortly before he passed away, but I never told anyone. I didn't want to cause drama back then. But now it was my ace. I called Sandra again, despite the late hour. She picked up on the second ring. "Chloe," she said, her voice calm and professional. "What's the emergency?" "I need to know how soon I can legally evict them if things get worse," I said. Sandra paused for a moment, and then I heard the sound of her typing on a keyboard. "Technically, the house is in your name. If they don't cooperate or return your money, you could start the eviction process within days. But that's a nuclear option, Chloe. Are you ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. If they push me, I won't hold back. The next morning, I got ready for work as usual, but my mind was buzzing with everything I had to do. I packed my lunch, grabbed my laptop, and walked past my parents without saying a word. They noticed the change. My mom narrowed her eyes as she watched me put on my coat. "Chloe, are you still mad about last night?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. I smiled, my first real smile in 24 hours. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm fine." I left the house and went straight to Sandra's office to finalize the legal paperwork. We filed the necessary documents to freeze my remaining savings, preventing my parents or Laura from touching another dime. Next, we drafted a legal notice demanding that the stolen money be returned within 2 weeks or face legal action. By the time I returned home that evening, the paperwork had been sent. My parents had no idea that the clock was ticking. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. I was in my room when I heard the shouting downstairs. My dad was yelling at my mom, and Laura's name came up multiple times. I figured they had just received the legal notice. I walked downstairs, keeping my face neutral, as if I didn't know what was going on. My mom turned to me, her face red with anger. "What did you do, Chloe?" she demanded. "We got a letter saying we have 2 weeks to pay you back, or you're taking us to court. How could you do this to your own family? How could you steal from your own daughter?" I shot back, my voice steady. "You think you can just take my savings and get away with it? Not this time." My dad stepped forward, his tone threatening. "If you go through with this, you'll regret it. We'll make sure you lose everything." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You already took everything from me. What else is there to lose?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Oh, and by the way, the house you're living in? It's mine. I own it. I have the papers to prove it." Their faces went pale. For the first time, my parents were speechless. "You have 2 choices," I continued. "Return my money and apologize, or pack your bags. The choice is yours." The silence in the room was thick. My mom clutched the back of a chair for support, her face drained of color. My dad, usually the louder and more intimidating one, looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. "You're bluffing," he finally said, his voice unsteady. "There's no way you own this house." I calmly pulled out my phone and scrolled to the digital copy of the house deed. "See for yourself," I said, holding it up. "Grandpa transferred ownership to me before he passed away. I didn't want to bring this up, but since you stole from me, I'm done being quiet." Laura walked in at that moment, wearing her usual designer clothes, a coffee in hand, completely unaware of what was going on. "What's with the drama?" she asked, her eyes darting between us. My dad spun around. This is your fault. If you hadn't begged for money, we wouldn't be in this mess." Laura scoffed. "Excuse me? You gave me the money. I didn't force you to do anything." She turned to me. "And what's your problem, Chloe? You couldn't just let it go, could you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Let it go? You think you can steal $50,000 of my hard-earned money, and I'm supposed to just move on?" I took a step closer to her. "You've always been the favorite, Laura. They let you get away with everything, but not this time. This time, you don't win." Laura crossed her arms, trying to look unfazed. "Whatever. You're not getting that money back." "Oh, I think I will," I replied confidently. And if I don't, you and our parents are going to have a much bigger problem on your hands. I took a deep breath and looked at my parents. This is your last chance. You can return my money, sell something if you have to. If you do that, I won't press charges and you can stay in the house for a little while longer. And if we don't, my mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled. Then you'll be homeless and in court for fraud. Your choice. They exchanged panicked glances. My dad opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. Don't even try to threaten me. I have enough evidence to win this case easily. And if you want to keep fighting, just remember, this house is legally mine. I can have you evicted within days. I could see the defeat in their eyes. They weren't used to me standing up for myself, and they didn't know how to handle it. The next morning, my parents reluctantly agreed to return the money. They sold off some of their jewelry and collectibles and asked a distant relative for a loan to cover the rest. I didn't care where the money came from. I just wanted it back. But things didn't end there. I filed for formal eviction papers anyway, not out of cruelty, but because I knew that staying under the same roof with them would only lead to more problems. They had betrayed me, and I couldn't trust them again. Within 2 weeks, they packed their bags and moved in with Laura, who wasn't exactly thrilled to have them cramping her space. I wasn't sorry for them. They had chosen their path. I deposited the returned money into a new, secure account that only I could access. Then, I finalized the purchase of my new apartment. As I walked into my new home for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. A few months later, I received a letter from Laura. It was a desperate plea for help. Apparently, things weren't going well with my parents living under her roof. They argued constantly, and Laura's financial troubles had only worsened. She wanted me to lend her money to keep the family together. I read the letter twice, then tore it up and threw it in the trash. I had given them enough. It was time to live my life for me.